Short period of time, and you're hungry much sooner, and then you have to eat again, and then you have to eat again, and then you have to eat again.
It is a lot cheaper to go eat fast food. I mean,
So right after you eat these meals, you have energy. But the energy lasts a very short period of time, and you're hungry much sooner. And then you have to eat again, and then you have to eat again, and then you have to eat again.
It is a lot cheaper to go eat fast food. I mean, definitely, you can buy a hamburger for cheaper than you can buy an apple.
That's very sad because you're telling me I have to pay more in order to eat healthy, and I can pay less in order to get fat and to make me rich, or for something that I might die off of.
It's unbelievable.
The poorest people in our country are the fattest people. We've done something completely wrong here.
On a Sunday afternoon in a New Orleans suburb, the Bucktown Seafood Festival is getting underway. Bucktown is a tiny fishing village that has been here for more than 150 years. It was almost completely destroyed by Hurricane Katrina in 2005, but it hasn't lost its touch for what it does best.
Food is a big part of the culture in New Orleans, and they tend to use a lot of deep-fried foods and heavy sauces. They'll tell you that while people in other places may eat to live, here, they actually live to eat.
With New Orleans, most of our food begins with what we call a roux. And a roux is a combination of flour and oil.
Searching for the perfect family ski vacation? Find it with Vrbo. They search millions.
And that's the basis for most of our sauces. And as a result, there's a lot of fat that's in the basic foods that we make, from the soups, the gumbos, to your etouffees.
How important is food to the culture down here?
It's what we live off of. Without, you take the food away and this city would die. It would. It's all about food and drink around here. You know, the certain way we do seafood, you know, the certain way we fry. I mean, like these guys behind us, the way they fry, the way we take whole onions and, you know, we fry all kind of stuff and make it taste good with the extra spice and throw it the extra kick.
That can't be good for you.
Nah, it can't be, but it sure tastes good.
Have you ever seen anyone eat one of those?
You know, when I was younger, I used to be able to eat one. I couldn't touch a half of one now. It's a big sandwich.
The high-fat, deep-fried food culture here is delicious, but has deadly consequences.
Look at our diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease. Like, these are major killers.
Wendy O'Neill was born in New Orleans. After Katrina, she says, it's even more difficult to access good food.
It's definitely harder and harder to make food choices. I mean, just with having less time. I do a lot of fast food, and I actually hate fast food. I don't like the way it tastes, but I'll eat it because it's cheap and I can get it on the run.
Typical day for me, let's see. McDonald's for breakfast, McDonald's for lunch, McDonald's for dinner. We ate McDonald's all the time. We ate the trashiest stuff.
For Sidney Impostado, weight has always been an issue. He's down now to 170 kilos from nearly 200. It's been a difficult challenge for his family to endure.
Somehow we see an internal medicine doctor who has a plan that we can go to, and but you know, the prescriptions that he really needs we can't afford, and the specialists we can't afford to see, the kidney specialist, and so it's not a good situation.
I don't want to be the fat guy that was just another typical fat guy who died and, well, we loved him. I wish he would have lost weight. He would have been skinny and he would have lived. I don't want to be that.
Don has reached the point with Sidney because he believes an operation that would constrict his stomach with a band may be his best hope. But no insurance company will give him coverage because his obesity is considered a pre-existing condition.
You know, it is a radical approach, but if he can't get it soon, his body will not be strong enough to even have that done.
Don and Sidney aren't alone. Consider the facts. 2 out of every 3 Americans are overweight, and that number is expected to rise to 3 out of 4 by 2020. The United States is the world's fattest developed nation, with an obesity rate double of that in many European countries. 1 in 3 Americans is expected to have diabetes by 2050. Minorities have been even more profoundly affected. Blacks have a 50% higher prevalence of obesity, and Hispanics 25% higher when compared with whites. So how did it get this way?
Obesity rates have been going up very rapidly in the United States, but really only since about 1980. Before that, they were constant for decades. A change in the way our federal agriculture policy worked, which went from paying farmers not to grow food to paying farmers to grow as much food as they possibly could. And the result of that was an enormous increase in the amount of food available in the country for consumption.
Portion sizes went up as well. Fast food servings are 2 to 5 times what they used to be.
This is the signature Burger King store in Times Square, New York. This particular meal has somewhere around 3,600 calories. Look at this. It would take around 18 hours of exercise to burn off this many calories.
I mean, I still remember there was a Coke machine in the teacher's lounge of my elementary school, and it had these itty-bitty little bottles. I think they probably were 8-ounce bottles of Coke. And now, I mean, it's the average portion that you see if you went into like a convenience store would probably be a 20-ounce bottle that's sold as a single serving.
American food policy doesn't happen in isolation. There are many moving parts that make up a complex puzzle. Large government agencies, multinational corporations, and of course lobbyists who try to shape the country's food policies that comes out of Washington.
For government to try to force changes, to dictate to consumers in a free society what they do is there's not a good record of that being successful.
All of this goes back to Congress. And if you want to do something about public health in America, what you really need to do is to change election campaign laws so that these big corporations aren't paying for congressional elections. That's the source of corruption in American government.
2 out of every 3 food stores in Harlem is what's known as a bodega. Now, these aren't grocery stores. They're more like corner convenience stores. So rather than having fresh meat and fresh vegetables, they tend to have a lot of processed foods, sugary foods, and especially sodas.
The city of New York has identified sodas and other sugar-sweetened beverages as one of the main causes of obesity. In an attempt to improve health and decrease consumption, the city has requested a 2-year ban on allowing recipients of food stamps, or SNAP, to purchase the drinks.
The SNAP program is really not designed to purchase a person's entire diet, but it's designed to give them more money so that they can afford nutritious foods. And I don't think anyone in this country would argue that sugar-sweetened beverages are nutritious foods.
While the request is being considered by the Department of Agriculture, the beverage industry is fighting back.
It'll add $5 to these drinks. That's not pennies, that's serious money.
New York has fought a similar battle once before and lost when it tried to implement a soda tax earlier this year.
We can't afford no to the beverage tax.
The American Beverage Association spent more than $10 million on their ad campaign defeating the bill.
People are entitled to treat themselves at a certain level.
But are they entitled to treat themselves with government money?
By
as
all
opposed
means,
to their own money?
By all means, because soda is not the sole culprit of obesity. And if you're going to pinpoint what are the culprits of obesity, we're going to have to eliminate maybe 60% of the products we sell in the supermarkets today.
What about people who say, great, eliminate them?
Well, then you have to do that across the board, but the American food landscape is going to be totally different than what we know it today.
One drink for sale at the supermarket is Chubby. Imported from the Caribbean, the manufacturer of the drink boasts that it was developed to target children, and that it fits snugly in the palm of a child's hand. The U.S. has no rules or laws that prevent a soda from being marketed to children. Industry backers like it that way.
An exciting new category in the soft drink industry was created when Chubby was developed to target children.
That's a terrible idea. But, I mean, when was the last time you were able to see Little Chubbies? First of all,
Here's Little Chubbies. It's bought in Washington, D.C.
I'm not going to
make it small.
I'm not going to defend Little Chubbies. This is the kind of poor practice that shouldn't be occurring.
Should it be regulated?
Should it be regulated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about 7 donuts worth of sugar in there.
So, let's see, it doesn't
They don't put the nutritional information on the bottle.
Oh, well, then it's on the container if it's on the package. Otherwise, it's not legal to be sold in the United States. I don't know where you got it.
Tell me about it. Got that in Washington, D.C.
Okay, well, I suspect you should probably
But you can
call
get
the
their
company.
nutritional information off their website.
Okay.
30 to 34
Well, I'm
grams
not
of
going to
sugar,
defend it.
depending on the flavor.
I'm just not going to defend it. That's a terrible practice.
Should it be regulated?
Should it be regulated?
Should children be protected from that?
Protected? That's what parents are for.
For many Americans, economic times have never been worse. But for fast food companies, they've never been better.
It's time to swap the school run for a black run, so you start searching for a family ski trip. Ski resorts, ski chalets, ski lodges. Before
While 1 in 8 Americans rely on food stamps, the stocks of Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and McDonald's are at all-time highs. For consumers, stretching their recession dollars to buy healthy food has been tough, especially when chains like Little Caesars offer a large pizza for only $5, or the McDonald's McDouble. Their double cheeseburger goes for just $1.
Your mother gives you $5. You want to make that stretch, you understand? You're going to McDonald's, you're getting a McDouble, and you're getting you some fries. And then you're going to go to the store and get you something to drink. And that way you still have at least $1 or $2 to maybe buy you some chips a little later.
Growing up, I had home economics in school, and so they taught you what a healthy plate looked like. You had a starch, a protein, a vegetable, and I think that's the information that children don't have. And because they see in their environment unhealthy food and they see it's cheaper, it's being consumed by everybody, they don't think about an alternative. But if you gave them the education, maybe they would have the information to make the alternative choice, the healthier choice.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Well, this was a really up-tempo song.
At the Thurgood Marshall Lower Academy, an elementary school on 151st Street,
Everybody get your beatboxes ready!
an experiment is underway to fight back against the array of bad food choices in the community. Dr. Olajide Williams is a neurologist at Harlem Hospital. He's developed a program that harnesses the power of hip-hop music to teach children about healthy food choices.
Hip-hop is a social epidemic amongst the youth. Hip-hop is the life form amongst the youth.
One thing the program teaches is menu board literacy, the ability to read a food label.
There are ranges on the menu board, there are inches and sizes, and it's very, very complicated.
And we also would like you to take the messages that you've learned in our Hip Hop Heals program to your parents, to your grandparents, to your friends and your family members, and teach them about calories.
Dr. Williams knows that the odds are stacked against him. Nearly half the children in Harlem are overweight or obese. And his message has to beat out a well-oiled, well-funded fast food industry that spent $4.2 billion on advertising last year.
We are up against an incredible enemy, for lack of a better word. You know, fast food industry makes money. We are one little small program trying to make a difference in our city, one block at a time, one street at a time, one neighborhood at a time. If we can succeed here in Harlem, we can pretty much succeed in any tough neighborhood across the world.
It's Media Day at the White House, and journalists from around the world are clamoring to see Michelle Obama's kitchen garden. She's decided to make healthy eating and exercise the centerpiece of her role as First Lady.
We have to eliminate food deserts in this country, and we need to do it now.
You don't need to travel far from the White House, just a few miles, to find what Michelle Obama describes as a food desert. Plenty of liquor stores, but no fresh food. Southeast D.C. has one of the worst obesity rates in the country.
The food that you put in your body can either heal you or kill you.
On a Saturday morning, the Ward 8 Farmers Market is a small oasis in an otherwise barren food landscape.
Know what you're doing now.
Yes.
Lauren Vonderpool, a Washington, D.C. native and vegan chef, is giving a demonstration, teaching residents how to make a raw food salad.
So, this is a raw food dish, and now raw foods are good because when you cook your foods, a lot of times the enzymes and the nutrients are released into the water. I was born in Washington, D.C. I was raised in a food desert, and people just don't know. People just don't know. They haven't been exposed. They haven't left Southeast. We're done! They're used to what they've been exposed to. And what they've been exposed to is liquor stores, corner stores, and carryouts. Chicken wings with mumbo sauce, hot chips with blue juices. If all else fails you and you can't find the small jugs of the blue juice, we always have access to the gallon of the blue juice.
Look at that. So that's a gallon of blue juice.
Snow Mountain. Ridiculous.
Artificially colored and artificially flavored. How would you describe the health of people who live in environments like this?
Where we are right now in D.C., which is Southeast, Ward 8, is statistically the most obese place in the country. There's something wrong with that being in the nation's capital, something extremely wrong with that. What I find is that when you're eating foods and there are no nutrients in it, you're going to want to eat more because your body is not recognizing the nutrients that you're needing. So you're going to keep on eating. Your body's intelligence says, well, let me keep on eating to try to get some of these nutrients, but you're not getting any of it because you're eating fried foods, you're eating dead foods, you're eating foods that have no life.
This is the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA. It represents the American food industry, everything from small farmers to chain restaurants. And in doing so, it helps them sell more food. But it also puts out the dietary guidelines for Americans. And for a nation facing an obesity epidemic, eating less food could be the only way out. So how can this one department represent these conflicting interests?
The USDA, whose historic role has been to promote American agribusiness, is now also in the position of promoting healthful diets. And that was never a problem before obesity became a problem. It was only when dietary advice needed to change to encourage people to eat less that the USDA came into conflict. And those conflicts have played out over the years.
Can you give an example?
Well, the dietary guidelines for Americans, which is the advice that the government gives the people about what to eat, it never says eat less of anything.
I worked very hard on setting up the first review process for those to be sure that scientific authorities were calling the shots.
Searching for the perfect family ski vacation? Find it with Vrbo. They search millions of chalets to find...
John Bodie was the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture for Food and Consumer Services during the 1980s. Now he's a lobbyist representing clients like Kraft Foods and McDonald's. It's what's known as the revolving door between the food industry and the government agencies meant to regulate it. For example, Michael Taylor was an executive at the agricultural giant Monsanto before taking a senior post at the Food and Drug Administration. Or Catherine Wotecki, who left the USDA in 2001 and later joined Mars, the candy company that makes Skittles and M&Ms, and then was brought back by President Obama this year to the USDA.
And so the revolving door, that causes some concern. That's understandable. The notion that our government officials would one day be a government official and the next day basically selling their influence. And so stepping out for a year, I think that makes good sense. And those restrictions,
enough, I mean, don't you still have
those
the
restrictions have been extended, and so they're now longer.
They're now longer.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what they are now?
I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable trying to recite what they are now.
Listen up, America. The Cheesy Bites Pizza is back.
In 2007, Pizza Hut came out with Cheesy Bites Pizza. As you'd expect, it's high in calories and saturated fat. What you may not suspect is that some of the support for it came from a surprising source, a trade group overseen by the USDA.
Is there a conflict of interest when you're representing the cheese industry and you're representing the nutritional interest of Americans?
Well, I wouldn't presume to speak to that because that's not my particular area of expertise. I will tell you that the Food and Nutrition Service, a part of USDA that tries to encourage healthy eating in a school setting, has never taken it more seriously than we do today.
We pressed Julie Paradis about this several times.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just not going to be able to answer that hard question.
Today, the USDA is celebrating the opening of a salad bar at an elementary school in Washington, D.C. It's a step in the right direction for a school system that has one of the highest obesity rates in the country. 43% of the students here are either obese or overweight.
This is very, very atypical of what you see in the school system. Mostly it's processed, high in sugar food.
Cahal Armstrong is an executive chef and owner of a local 4-star restaurant. He took an interest in school food when the White House chef personally asked him to make a visit.
Yeah, we visited Tyler Elementary on Capitol Hill, and we went into the cafeteria and went into the refrigerators and the freezer, and inside the freezer they had this box of turkey sandwiches, and it's turkey sandwich for breakfast, and it had about 100 ingredients in it. We were so shocked. I took a photograph of the ingredients that were on the label.
Wait, turkey sandwiches like meat, bread?
Meat and bread, the last time I checked. And bread has 4 ingredients, sometimes 5. So then the kids...
Why do they do this?
It makes the food cheaper.
Ed Brusky was shocked at what he found when he volunteered in his daughter's elementary school cafeteria.
So I went in and expecting to see food cooked from scratch, and here comes all these frozen beef crumbles and tater tots.
Ed started taking pictures of the food for a new blog so that parents could see what their kids were eating. It was mostly processed food. That's partially because the USDA diverts raw excess food to large companies that return it to schools in the form of patties, pizzas, and nuggets.
It's all about money and the so-called value-added products where corporations can somehow get between you and real farm products and whip it into something that they can make money off of. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Our health versus their money. What do you suppose it is?
Seeds.
Ed works part-time at a private school in Washington, teaching children how to cook and enjoy food. He's seen real changes in the D.C. public school system. Less sugary foods and more fruits and vegetables.
My feeling is school food is important because we're perpetuating a culture of junk food that is literally making kids sick.
The U.S. government says the current generation could be the first in history to have a shorter lifespan than their parents. The forces driving the obesity spike in America may be complex, but they're not unknown. The question is, who's profiting from the current situation? Clearly, not the children.
I think it comes down to money, and I think it's a complicated, multi-layered problem, and I think it's something that's perpetuated itself throughout the years, especially for people of color. To be in a very poor urban area is not exactly a choice. Your money dictates that you need to live there. And the same thing with what you buy to eat. You buy within your means.
The economics of our food structure are completely working against public health. I mean, you almost couldn't have designed a worse environment where you take your least healthy products, things that are high in sugar and fat and salt and highly processed, and you make them significantly less expensive than your most healthy products.
And a lot of families are just in that financial situation where cheap food is so heavily subsidized, so falsely inexpensive, that they just don't know any better, And I tell you, once they find out what we've done with their food system, what we're doing to their children, hopefully they'll be up in arms about it.
Come back to you. Yeah. Well, we are back. I hope you all learned something from that video. This video to me was very educational. It was my first time hearing something called a food desert, as described by our First Lady, Michelle Obama. That video showed just why nutrition is important. It reminded us, too, that our children, school lunches, fast food, minority communities are having to deal with this much more than other groups of people. And again, I don't want to say that fast food, snack foods, processed foods are terrible, but we've got to do it intelligently. We got to increase our health IQ and make reasonable decisions when it comes to our food and staying healthy, because otherwise the diabetes, the blood pressure, the heart disease, the fatty liver disease, it is real and it is coming for you. So before we go to break, I want to take a moment to share with you some of the exciting things we're seeing at my office, because I get to spend a lot of time one-on-one talking with people about these issues, because these are everyday real situations where people are trying to avoid diabetes or other chronic medical illnesses, or people already have it and they're trying to get better. And one particular person, they were having a really hard time controlling their diabetes, and to the point where complications were already there, the possibility of going blind, having a heart attack, and amputations were there. And we said, hey, let's go ahead and start with adding insulin. And nobody likes insulin. Insulin, when you say that word, it terrifies people. And this person got pretty terrified too, and really went ahead and changed his life. He started exercising more, started paying attention to what he was putting in his mouth or her mouth, and began to really see diabetes that had been terrible actually normalized. It got better. And to the point where we saw a 40-pound weight loss. We saw an opportunity to begin to decrease medications. And that was incredible, because the flip side of that would be increasing your medications, having to start insulin, and dealing with complications. Not to mention what's also happening with your blood pressure and kidneys, the risk of stroke as well. So I want to remind everybody, we have 30 million diabetics in this country, 100 million plus pre-diabetics. And much of this is because we're having to learn how to make better decisions about our food, better decisions about our exercise, and better decisions about how we want to live our lives when it comes to nutrition. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead to a quick break. We'll come back. We got an exciting short video which will tell you a little bit more about how bad foods have an effect on the insides of your body, and begin to further educate you on things you can do to improve your health. Again, my name is Dr. Darrell Hill. You are listening to Doctors in the House. I can be reached at 301-497-0401, or you can reach me at laurelmedicine.com. That's laurelmedicine.com. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you on the other side.
But I'm going to show you guys in this. Magic wall animation, what can happen to you. You all may remember last year, I actually went on a Project Unhealthy. In 5 days, I gained 8 pounds. In 5 days, I actually became hypertensive, developed high blood pressure. I don't even want to know what was going on inside my body. America, listen up. This is what you're doing to yourself. I did it for 5 days. I felt miserable. I gained weight. I put my body in jeopardy, and it wasn't worth it. And you know what? I'm never going to do it again. Why did I do it? To prove a point. When you eat these foods, it causes an addictive pattern in your mind. But in the end, all you end up is overweight, lethargic, and not feeling good about yourself. This is me. So what happened when I ate a fast food meal? Well, something very simple. The contents enter your stomach, and I'm going to circle some of these contents that I call some of the killer contents of food. Sodium. These are fat molecules. These are refined sugar molecules. No big deal, right? Well, it is a big deal, because when they hit your stomach, good things start happening, believe it or not. That's that dopamine release in your brain, because dopamine and serotonin are going wild. You feel great. Oh my gosh, this tastes wonderful. It does, right? For the first few minutes. But things are also going on inside your body that aren't so great. Your pancreas is secreting more and more insulin to deal with that massive sugar overload from the fries, from the white bun, from the soda. Insulin does one thing. It drives sugar into cells. But it does something else. It tells your body to store fat. Why else would you have eaten a meal that big and that many calories unless you're about to go into hibernation? That's what you do when you hibernate. You grow a big belly. That fat that you see here, those fat cells actually grow in size. They start to secrete even more toxic substances, leading to heart disease, diabetes, and so many other things. All that sodium causes your blood pressure to go up, so your heart's beating twice as fast against twice as much resistance. And in your brain, you no longer are releasing dopamine, but instead, your brain is signaling you to release cortisol. Cortisol is a chronic stress hormone that ironically tells you to store even more fat. And last, but certainly not least, what isn't going on in my brain right now? I'm 30 minutes after my meal. There's no more dopamine. There's no more serotonin. I'm lethargic. I feel unhappy. I don't feel good about myself. And that is why when you first eat a fast food meal, you feel great. And 30 minutes later, you feel terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Kim.
Yes.
After everything you have heard here today, would you be willing to try to make some changes?
Yes.
I'm going to give you a copy of this book, The Lean Belly Prescription. The reason I'm going to do it is because this has foods in it that taste great, that are also good for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kim, for being such a great sport.
Drawing tends to happen more often.
You're probably aware of all the foods that are good for you, like fresh fruits and vegetables. But do you know about the foods that can kill you? These unhealthy foods can lead to some serious health problems, especially if you eat them regularly. Want to know what they are? Well, keep reading. Number 1, low-fat foods. A lot of people think that they are being healthy by purchasing foods that are labeled as low-fat. Unfortunately, this is not the case, as most of these foods are packed with unhealthy chemicals to make up for the lack of fat. These chemicals are extremely bad for your body and can even damage your health over time. Number 2, margarine. People choose margarine over butter because it doesn't have cholesterol in it, but what you need to pay attention to is what is in it. Margarine is extremely high in trans fat, which can damage your blood vessels and even increase your cholesterol. Number 3, fruit juice. A lot of shoppers think they are healthy when they purchase fruit juice, but these are actually very bad for the body. Not only are most made with artificial flavors and not any real fruit, they are packed full of sugar and other chemicals that can cause obesity and other serious health problems. Even real fruit juice is packed full of sugar that provides you with no nutritional value. It is best to eat a piece of fruit instead of drink it, unless you're juicing your own fresh fruits and vegetables at home. Number 4, processed meats. The chemicals that are inside of processed meats have been linked to colon cancer and many other health problems. They are also packed full of sugar, salt, and fat that can lead to obesity and diabetes. You're always better off cooking your own meat from lean cuts and avoiding the processed meats altogether. Number 5, energy bars. Energy bars are marketed as healthy snacks for people who want to lose weight and get fit. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't read the nutritional information on these bars in the first place. Many of them are made with a lot of sugar and fat, even though they are high in protein. You're better off staying away from these and reaching for a natural snack like almonds and cheese instead. Number 6, frozen dinner and lunches. Sure, those frozen meals are convenient, but what price do you pay for that convenience? These frozen dinners, even those that are low in calories, are really high in sodium. They are also extremely processed, which means they really put your body through a lot of work in order to digest through your body. Number 7, breakfast cereals. There are really only a few breakfast cereals on store shelves today that are actually good for you. Even those that are labeled healthy generally turn out to be packed full of sugar and fat. You might be surprised to find that most of the cereals you love have more sugar than your dessert does. On top of that, cereals are normally processed quite a bit and made with chemicals to make them seem healthier to the consumer. Number 8, donuts. Speaking of breakfast foods, who doesn't love a sugary donut when they are running late to start the day? Although they may taste good, these are a huge source of sugar, fat, trans fat, and carbohydrates. In fact, just one of these fried treats is generally over 300 calories. Since most people tend to eat more than one, this can lead to quick weight gain without even realizing it. Number 9, soda. Regular soda is a huge source of sugar and a variety of other chemicals that have been linked to several different types of cancer. These provide absolutely no nutritional value to you and can lead to diabetes as well. Even diet soda carries risks as it's made with a lot of chemicals to make up for the lack of sugar, and these have been linked to diseases and cancers. Number 10, potato chips. Before you reach for that bag of potato chips, think again. These are filled with a lot of fat and calories. But did you know that they are also loaded with dangerous chemicals? Most chips are made with acrylamide, which is created when foods are fried at extremely high temperatures. This chemical is linked to cancer, which can result in death.
Doctors in the house. I am Dr. Darrell Hill. Sometimes I feel like a broken record when we have to talk about all these good tasting foods that, if you're like me, kind of grew up on and didn't really know that they could be bad for you. The lunch meats, the potato chips, the hot dogs, we can go on and on, sodas. But the reality is, at some point, we got to begin to make changes in our lives. Doesn't mean we should never do it, but if we do it, we've got to really make some clever decisions and not overdo it. As mentioned before, we got to teach our young people about this stuff too, because for so many of us, this becomes normalcy. And as a nation, I think we're getting much smarter in making decisions about nutrition and eating to live versus living to eat. And sometimes you got to stop and think about that. Eating to live versus living to eat. Do we want to do it just for pleasurable reasons all the time, or are we trying to eat in a healthy manner so that we can have a healthy life? So I just wanted to make sure we had a brief mention of that. And in the office, we've been talking quite a bit about how most of us get turned on to some of these bad foods at a very early age. When I grew up, it happened on a Saturday morning because that was when you sat down in front of the TV set watching your cartoons and got hit by all the commercials about the cereals. And the videos did speak about how cereals have so many artificial flavors and chemicals, along with an incredible amount of sugar. And as I recall, even back then, the sugar would be in the cereal pre-made, and we would also even add additional sugar. And the video kind of showed you how at the brain level, dopamine, which brings pleasure and to us all, those levels become very active when we're being exposed to all these sugars and chemicals, and at least so somewhat of an addiction to sugar. So let's continue to get smarter, make good decisions. I'm going to go ahead and say let's go to a quick break, and we'll come back to a video and kind of wrap things up. But hope you are learning, hope you are making good decisions, and I will see you on the other side.
decades that followed, other sociocultural shifts continued to contribute to the changing way we ate. Women who had previously controlled most of the average family's food preparation now entered the workforce in significant numbers, and the processed food industry began to capitalize on our need for fast, convenient food. This meant that fewer meals were being cooked at home, and since convenience foods were generally higher in calories than home-cooked meals, the average person's caloric intake increased dramatically. Academics studying the intersection of food and health, like Michael Pollan, have written extensively about the implications of this cultural shift on the way we eat today.
To the extent we outsource our food, first, we eat less healthy food, more salt and fat and sugar, but we also eat more food because processed food is often designed as snack food and marketed to us as a way to eat continually through the day.
The changes in the way we as a society ate led to the emergence of obesity as a recognized chronic disease with well-defined health consequences. And medical recommendations were made to try and address this growing health crisis. In the second half of the 20th century, a lot of attention was focused on reducing saturated fat and total fat in our diets. And the processed food industry responded by giving us what we wanted. But they still had a vested interest in selling their products, so they found other ways to make the reduced fat products taste good. One way they did this was by adding significantly more sugar and other forms of sugar like corn syrup to almost everything we ate. This not only made the reduced fat foods more appealing, but it also increased their shelf life. So the food industry had a huge incentive to add corn syrup and other sweeteners to packaged foods. The resulting increase in our intake of simple sugars fueled our modern epidemics of obesity and diabetes. These shifts in our food consumption patterns have led us to a point in history where a physiological adaptation, our ability to store energy as fat, has become maladaptive. The balance between food availability and energy expenditure has been disrupted, and it's left us with an exponential increase in the incidence of obesity over the past 60 years, an epidemic that the World Health Organization has labeled a worldwide public health crisis. Over the past 60 years, the amount of sugar consumed as part of the typical Western diet has increased dramatically. Significant increases in sugar consumption have been documented in most countries where heavily processed food has become readily available. Surprisingly, some experts estimate that only 1/6 of our sugar comes from desserts or foods that we think of as sweets. The majority of our sugar comes in the form of highly processed food and sweetened beverages. Many people are becoming aware of the need to reduce their sugar intake in order to maintain a healthy body weight. But what many people still aren't aware of is the fact that sugar, under a variety of different pseudonyms, is added to so many foods that we don't expect to contain sugar. Things like packaged breads, condiments, chips, sauces, and salad dressings. In 2015, the World Health Organization released new guidelines strongly recommending that all adults and children reduce their sugar intake to less than 10% of total calories consumed. These recommendations go on to suggest that a further reduction of sugar intake to less than 5% of total calories would likely have additional health benefits. These recommendations focus on free sugars, those that are added to foods by the manufacturer, the cook, or the consumer, as well as sugars that are naturally present in honey, syrups, and fruit juices. But they don't apply to intrinsic sugars found in whole fruits and vegetables because the World Health Organization found no reported evidence linking the consumption of intrinsic sugars to adverse health effects. The sugar that naturally occurs in milk is also excluded from that 5%. For the average adult consuming a 2,000 calorie per day diet, reducing their sugar intake to 5% would mean that ideally no more than 100 calories per day should come from free sugars. Since free sugars offer 4 calories of energy per gram, this would translate into approximately 25 grams of free sugar, about 6 teaspoons. 6 teaspoons seems like a generous allocation when you picture spooning it out of a sugar bowl. But when you begin to look at the nutrition labels of most packaged foods, the numbers begin to add up incredibly quickly. For example, a 1/2 cup serving of organic granola can contain 16 grams or 4 teaspoons of sugar. If 1/2 of a cup of regular sweetened yogurt is added to that cereal for breakfast, this can add another 4 teaspoons of sugar, and you've already exceeded your recommended sugar intake by 2 full teaspoons before leaving the house. There's a growing consensus that we need to cut down on our sugar consumption, and yet there may be a downside to vilifying sugar the way we did with the dietary fats. If we only emphasize the need to cut down on our sugar intake without simultaneously emphasizing moderation and balance in our diet as a whole, we risk a situation where fats and animal proteins are seen by the general public as free food, and the processed food industry again steps in and supersizes.
It's been interesting to read the research and see the shift in attention from treating fat as the evil nutrient to treating sugar as the evil nutrient. Now, we went overboard on fat. It turns out fat is not as evil as we thought, and saturated fat is not necessarily the thing to worry most about in your diet. And in fact, our obsession with saturated fat led us to promote trans fats, which turned out to actually be lethal. So I'm very wary of focusing all our attention on a single nutrient. Sugar has been part of the human diet for a very long time. It's prized by people all over the world. We have evolved to like the flavor of sugar for very good reasons, but we are eating too much of it. And I think we definitely need to cut down on the amount of sugar we're eating, but I think companies need to disclose added sugar, which they don't now have to do in processed foods. I'm very concerned that sugar is being added to foods that never were sweetened before. Things like bread now have sugar in them, and condiments of all kinds. Because if you put more sugar in a food, you will sell more of it. So we need to be conscious of it. But does it explain everything about our diet? No, it really doesn't.
All nutrients are not created equal, especially when it comes to their effect on our health. So shifting our focus from nutrients to foods can help us develop better eating habits that will support our long-term health.
Getting our head around the idea that we should be focused on the category of foods, not nutrients, is, I think, very important. And I think doctors should be talking to patients about foods, even if, as scientists and researchers, they see through foods to nutrients. It may be a helpful way to study foods. It's not a helpful way to communicate about them.
Let's look at an example of how focusing on nutrients rather than food can leave us confused and potentially consuming a diet that's dangerous to our health. In recent years, a lot of attention has been focused on the fact that many of us are eating too many carbohydrates. There are lots of popular diet trends that encourage us to drastically reduce the carbohydrates in our diet, even to the point of limiting our intake of fresh fruit. At the same time, some of these low-carb diets seem to suggest that protein and fats can be eaten freely, but a diet that's very high in animal protein and contains no whole grains or not enough fruits and vegetables could leave us with serious problems in the long run. In fact, the category carbohydrates includes a wide spectrum of foods, some of which are really important for our health, and some of which can compromise it. Whole grains like brown rice and rolled oats are carbohydrates that provide our bodies with a usable source of energy, and bound together in that very same food is a significant amount of fiber, which slows the release of glucose from that food into the bloodstream. The glycemic index of a food is a measure of the speed at which glucose is released into the bloodstream after it's digested. A whole grain like brown rice or quinoa will result in a slower release of glucose and a more muted insulin response. On the other hand, a food that's high in refined carbohydrates like white bread or soda will lead to a more rapid release of glucose into the blood, and in response to this, the body releases a large amount of insulin, the hormone in our bodies that lowers blood sugar. Because spikes of glucose and insulin lead to less stable blood sugar levels, eating foods that are refined, especially highly processed carbohydrates, can result in an earlier return of hunger and a tendency to overeat. The glycemic index of a food is lower when the food contains fiber or when it's eaten in combination with protein foods or foods containing some dietary fat. For people who are struggling to manage their weight or their blood sugar levels, eating foods that have a low glycemic index is especially important, but choosing low glycemic foods is generally a good idea for all of us. So when we talk about dietary carbohydrates, we're actually talking about a very broad family of foods, some that can be harmful to our long-term health and some that can support it. Learning how to choose the right foods within each nutrient category is one of the keys to long-term success. Protein-rich foods, including animal and plant-based proteins, can also vary enormously in their quality and their implications for our long-term health. Proteins are often said to act as building blocks for the lean tissues in our bodies, but they serve many other important functions in body regulation, supportive immune function, and a variety of other roles in our physiology. There are 20 types of amino acids needed to fulfill all of these functions, but only 9 of them are essential, meaning that our bodies can't make enough of them, so we rely on getting these from our food. In general, animal sources of protein like fish and eggs provide all of the essential amino acids in high enough concentrations that these foods are called complete protein sources. In contrast, plant-based protein sources like beans, lentils, nuts, and tofu tend to be incomplete sources of protein. It might seem that since plant-based proteins are incomplete in their nutrient content, that they're nutritionally inferior compared with animal-based proteins. But in fact, the health benefits of substituting plant-based proteins for animal-based ones, ideally a few days a week, this far outweighs the risk of falling short on essential amino acids. Plant-based proteins can be combined with other foods to provide a complete amino acid profile. In fact, many traditional food combinations like corn and black beans or rice and lentils are based on the principle of combining complementary proteins. Meals that contain vegetarian sources of protein also contain more fiber and less fat, especially saturated fat, than meals that feature animal-based protein. And even though saturated fat may not be as harmful as we once thought, it can still contribute to elevated levels of LDL cholesterol if we eat too much of it. So moderating our intake of red meat, for example, is still a sensible idea. In general, the typical Western diet contains more animal-based protein than we need to sustain good health.
People who eat lots of plant foods, eat a plant-based diet, tend to have much better health and better longevity than people who eat a heavy meat diet.
So if you're thinking of trying a low-carb, high-protein diet, it's important to pay attention to the kinds of proteins that are being consumed and in what quantities. A diet high in animal protein, especially if it's poor quality animal protein like processed meat or high-fat cuts of meat, this kind of diet can be harmful to our health, even if it leads to weight loss in the short term. Processed meats often contain nitrates used as a preservative, which can damage blood vessels and contribute to hardening of the arteries. These meats also tend to be very high in sodium, which can be a contributor to high blood pressure. The most Sensible diets are usually those that encourage us to eat moderate amounts of high-quality protein foods. These should come from a variety of different sources, including some fish if possible, as well as plenty of vegetarian sources of protein that are combined for completeness. As the number of regular supermarkets increases, more and more people have access to the basic ingredients they need.
I know I did. That show made me hungry, by the way, so once I leave here, I got to make sure I get a healthy meal. We talked a lot today in that video about proteins, about a balanced diet, about, maybe switching in more vegetables throughout the week instead of just having proteins from meat. As we move forward into the coming weeks, we're going to continue to focus on other lifestyle choices to help improve your health. We've done quite a bit of talking about nutrition and diet and diabetes, so we'll begin to move on to some other topics so that we can continue to help improve in your health and help you prevent problems, help you manage problems. Feel free to share this information and feel free to continue doing the right thing so that we can all be as healthy as possible. Again, my name is Dr. Darrell Hill. I can be reached 301-497-0401. Laurel Medical Associates, laurelmedicine.com, always available on the web. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Doctors